Welcome to the Voice of MPE, the official podcast of Merchant Payments Ecosystem, the European #1 merchant payments conference and community. This podcast brings you exclusive interviews and discussions with top leaders and professionals from the entire payment world. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast, Voice of MPE. For more information, visit www.merchantpaymentsecosystem.com.
So, welcome to this podcast for MPE 2025. We got a very interesting topic for today. My name is Francesco Burelli. I'm a partner at Arkwright, and with us we got Katharina Luschnik, Mastercard Open Banking, and Panagiotis Kriaris of Unzer. So a very, very distinguished panel of experts with us this morning. I would like to start with a sort of $1 million type of question. Depending on the industry sentiment, open banking is referred as the future of payments, as a niche solution, as a big question mark that has been around for a while and nobody knows exactly where it's going. Where do you think the reality is?
Yeah, let me answer that question quickly, Francesco. From our perspective, open banking conceptually does payments and data across the globe and various variations to that. So we still think that open banking is super relevant on those two aspects. So we strongly believe that open banking payments can indeed further digitize things like classical bank transfers, invoice payments. There is an opportunity around direct debit. So there is for sure the need to further improve existing, let's call it legacy payment flows, where the technology itself can cater for the fact that the user experience, but also efficiency of payments is improved. We also see a big opportunity on the B2B segment, meaning the B covering the SME part of the business. So they are still underserved in a sense that sometimes they are lacking efficiency in the payment options they have for efficiently transferring money from one point to the other. So that quickly summarizes where we still see the opportunity on open banking, specifically in Europe. It's driven a lot by the instant mandate, for instance, as well. Yeah. On the data side, we still are scratching on the surface. So for sure, there are a lot of opportunities to improving insights of data, leveraging open banking use cases for the purpose of improving onboarding journeys, for instance, but also instantly giving access to account information for the purpose of understanding an individual's payment behavior, but also giving insights on available balances, for instance, verifying an individual or an entity even. So to summarize, we are still super optimistic and are simply only started to see more or less the activities around open banking.
Thank you very much indeed. Panagiotis, you have the pulse of the payment side, in particular with the merchants.
I mean, I think what's happening is the following. For me, the most interesting part is that we see, as I like to say, that we are now moving to a multi-rail payments landscape, meaning that it's not only, let's say, traditional payment methods, but we are seeing, I think, as a fact, additional payment methods, what I call multi-rail. And I think open banking is definitely one of these in this landscape, right? So, and you have so many that you can that you see right now. I mean, from let's say from the discussion around the CBDCs to traditional rails to crypto to open banking. I mean, to account in combination with instant. I mean, all kinds of stuff that was mentioned. So I think open banking is now becoming part of this multi-rail payments landscape. Depending on the geography, I think what we see is that we might see differences here and there, of course. But for example, if you look at let's say, quite innovative and new payment systems like in India or in Brazil, you're going to see that open banking, for example, has been a very interesting proposition for these payment systems, which speaks a lot in favor of the potential, right? So for me, and I think also on the merchant side, you also see now merchants that are basically looking for alternatives. Not only on the cost side, which is also very important, but also on the user experience side. So I think that's one of the reasons why, especially in Europe, open banking is going to have. I think the future is bright in terms of the potential.
Great. Thank you. Very promising perspectives. Now, if we look at open banking was the start of a journey that in other countries has become open finance. In many jurisdictions, the banks are pushing also for other type of non-financial information to be shared. Imagine a world where also retailers start sharing information around baskets, or within the limitation of privacy, customer protection, and commercial sensitivities, and so on. So we have we are at the beginning of a journey where data is central to value propositions. How do you see the developments?
I think from a global perspective, we probably need to differentiate between regulatory-driven activities and non-regulatory, so market demand-driven activities. If we have a closer look on Europe, for instance, where regulation for sure is driving data sharing in a secure way. You touched upon GDPR, you touched upon data privacy. That's a very important part of the PSD3 regulation, of the concept around FIDR, and of the concept around PSR. What I think is great to see that all these data sharing concepts linked to open finance, currently very much driven through open banking, is that you put the data owner into the center of everything. So the individual, from a consumer perspective, is owning data and only consent to share data if the use case would be of added value for the individual. And this is something which still impresses me, even though we all know that regulation can also been seen as a burden. But I think, due to the fact that Europe, the regulation is very much focusing on security as well, this should, to a certain extent, already drive demand from sharing data. And the FIDR principle and conceptually the idea around open finance is that you can also drive financial inclusion, because we still need to remember there might be individuals out there who would not have access to loans, who would not have access to even a bank account, simply out of the fact that there is not sufficient data available that a bank would be confident letting them open up an account or give them a short-term loan. And here, owning the data in a sense that you can access different sources of data points, making sure that the individual can actually prove being worth to be included in the financial ecosystem, is something where we still see relevance for open finance in a broader perspective. So that's just one of the aspects I think why still open finance is relevant from a consumer perspective, which is also always driving demand for it.
Yeah, very, very interesting. We got new wave of regulation coming up. I mean, open banking formally started with PSD1. Mm-hmm. Now we are...
I think just to add on this one, because Katharina mentioned, I think globally basically you see, Katharina mentioned you have the regulatory driven initiatives, you have the ones that are market driven, and then you have some kind of, a mixed one, for example, in India. And I think the US was famously one that was pursuing, let's say, the market model. But for me, it's very interesting to see now. I mean, we don't know yet what's gonna happen with the new administration because many things are changing. But for me, one of the most interesting twists of the last months was the fact that the US decided that they adopted a regulatory-driven approach, meaning that they said, okay, they realized at the end that the market can go as up to a certain point, and then you need data to become available, right? So that they decided that they take a step in the direction of what Europe has done. So at the end of the day, I think open banking and open finance is about is about accessing data, right, via the rails, the APIs. And I think the move that we now see to open finance in many jurisdictions, among which in Europe, is the fact that it's about the scope of the use cases. So you go from the account payment data, which was the beginning, to a more broad scope to include everything else, and that's basically the transition to open finance. So open finance is nothing else than the next step, the maturity of open banking, to include more use cases, to include more innovation, and to additional value, let's say. And I think there's lots of potential in this one.
Yeah, indeed. I would tend to absolutely agree. Just correcting an imprecision, PSD2, not PSD1, like from my previous question, that's where we started. Now, if we look at it, the regulation is an important building block, mindful of time. What do you think are the next building blocks that are somehow missing or not yet fully developed or in place that are going to lead to scale adoption or success of open banking in Europe?
I think first of all, it's a gap of harmonization still, specifically in Europe. You touched upon PSD 1 to 3, and there is also upcoming regulation like PSR and FIDA, for instance, and they are tapping exactly in the opportunity trying to harmonize it from a technology perspective. So we still see different market maturities, which makes it hard to really leverage the connectivity, as Panagiotis explained, in a multi-rail approach, and see the same quality of APIs across Europe. So that's a fundamental issue. We also see as a technology provider, being Mastercard, simply leveraging these APIs. So there is indeed a high demand and need to solve for equality of technology. This is hopefully something the upcoming regulation will be able to solve. And then you have also the fact that you see different country adoption also from a regulatory perspective. And here PSR, in my perspective, is the first regulation which taps into harmonizing also more or less how banks interpret the regulation, and hopefully make sure that we see it moving faster than it currently is the case, because it's still a lot due to interpretation in the different local regulations there. Yeah, so these are for me one of the 2 points where I hope at least that regulation drives that in a more efficient way than it was the case the last couple of years.
Thank you very much indeed. Panagiotis, last word.
With the additional benefit, PSR, that you don't have to transpose into national regulation, which was one of the complaints that we had for PSD2. So now I think it's been fixed. On top of the things that Katharina mentioned on the regulation side, I think what we need to address on the business side is that we need to address the needs of the different stakeholders, right? So I think we used to focus so far mostly on the consumers, but I think we tend to forget merchants, because they're part of the very significant driver for the adoption. And I think we also need to put a bit more emphasis on banks. I mean, now and banks have been, for example, always complaining that there is very low incentivization for them to make available state-of-the-art APIs. I think we are now moving with PSD3 and with FIDA or FIDA, we are moving in this direction of incentivizing to a certain extent also the banks to remunerate. So there is a business model, of course, with some restrictions. But of course, I think that's a huge change. That's an improvement. And I think on the merchant side, we also need to educate a bit more. We need to focus a bit more on the benefits. I think merchants, when you discuss with them, they really understand why it makes sense. They really get the benefits, not only on the cost side, but also on the user experience side. And what we see is that, for example, if you take, let's say, bigger merchants, there is a very strong demand in terms of white labeling open banking as a payment method. So imagine if you are, let's say, a big chain, or if you are a big brand, you might want to offer your customers your own payments method, which is something that you can very easily do via open banking. So it has these additional elements. I think we just need to bring all these benefits in a better way out to the mass audience.
Very interesting indeed. I'm pretty certain that our listeners are going to be envious, if they're not part of the audience, of the quality of the conversations that are taking place in MP 2025. But with this, time is up. So this was a Voice of MP podcast on open banking. Thank you to Katharina and Panagiotis for sharing their views.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to the official MPE podcast. If you've enjoyed today's episode, hit the subscribe button to stay ahead of the payments game. For even more content, connect with Merchant Payments Ecosystem on our official social media channels. Subscribe to our newsletter. See you at www.merchantpaymentsecosystem.com.